George Washington. When the United States first emerged, its greatest threat was not foreign invasion, but power itself. History was filled with leaders who, after winning independence, turned into rulers for life. George Washington had everything needed to do the same: an army, public support, and unmatched authority. Instead, he chose restraint. After winning the Revolutionary War, Washington voluntarily stepped down from military command and returned to private life. Later, as the first U.S. president, he set another historic precedent by limiting himself to 2 terms, even though nothing legally stopped him from ruling indefinitely. He did not build a cult of personality, silence opposition, or cling to power. Instead, he established the principle that the president serves the nation and the law, not the other way around. Washington's legacy is not just in policies, but in the example he set. He proved that true leadership sometimes means walking away from power when you have every reason to keep it. Abraham Lincoln. When Abraham Lincoln became president, the nation was already breaking apart. Several states had declared secession, the army was divided, and civil war seemed unavoidable. Lincoln entered office not as a popular hero, but as a compromise candidate, many viewed as weak and temporary. Rather than allowing the country to collapse, he made one of the most difficult decisions in American history: to preserve the Union at all costs. The war claimed hundreds of thousands of lives, and every decision Lincoln made carried enormous moral weight. He knew that a single mistake could permanently destroy the nation. In the middle of the conflict, Lincoln took an even bolder step by issuing the Emancipation Proclamation. It was not only a moral act, but a political risk that could have cost him crucial support. Still, he placed principles above popularity. Lincoln did not live to see the peace he helped secure. Yet his choices preserved the United States as a single nation and permanently reshaped the meaning of freedom and equality. Franklin D. Roosevelt. When Franklin D. Roosevelt became president, the United States was in the depths of crisis. Millions were unemployed, banks were collapsing, and the economy had nearly come to a halt. Public trust in government was shattered, and the future of democracy itself seemed uncertain. Roosevelt moved quickly and decisively. He launched a sweeping set of reforms later known as the New Deal. For the first time, the federal government took an active role in stabilizing the economy, creating jobs, reforming the banking system, and introducing social protections. These policies were controversial, but they restored hope to millions of Americans. As the world was drawn into World War II, Roosevelt faced an even greater challenge. Despite severe illness and physical limitations, he remained in office and coordinated the Allied response. His leadership helped position the United States as a decisive force in defeating fascism. Roosevelt became the only U.S. president elected 4 times. His legacy is a stronger federal government capable of protecting its citizens during the darkest moments. Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt became president at a time when America was rapidly transforming into an industrial powerhouse. Massive corporations dominated markets, workers faced dangerous conditions, and natural resources were being consumed without restraint. For years, the federal government had largely stayed out of economic affairs. Roosevelt took a different view. He saw unchecked corporate power as a threat and became the first president to aggressively enforce antitrust laws. Major monopolies were broken apart, and businesses learned that federal authority had real limits. At the same time, Roosevelt emerged as a champion of conservation. He established national parks, wildlife refuges, and protected lands, preserving millions of acres for future generations. In an era that viewed nature mainly as something to exploit, this approach was revolutionary. Roosevelt redefined the presidency itself. He showed that executive power could be used to protect the public interest, not just the most powerful players. Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson is best known as the author of the Declaration of Independence, but his presidency was just as consequential. In the early 19th century, the United States remained a young and vulnerable nation, surrounded by European powers that still viewed it as a temporary experiment. One of Jefferson's boldest decisions was the Louisiana Purchase from France. The deal instantly doubled the size of the country. The Constitution did not clearly grant the president authority to make such a move, and Jefferson himself questioned its legality. Still, he accepted the risk, believing expansion was essential for national security and long-term survival. Jefferson also argued for limited government and the protection of individual liberties. He believed unchecked federal power could easily become a threat to democracy if not restrained by law and principle. His legacy is complex, but undeniable. Jefferson shaped both the intellectual foundation and the physical expansion of the United States, helping transform it into a stable and lasting nation. Dwight D. Eisenhower. Dwight D. Eisenhower assumed the presidency during a period of relative peace, but beneath the surface, the world was dangerously unstable. The Cold War was beginning, nuclear weapons already existed, and a single miscalculation could have triggered global disaster. Eisenhower was not a career politician, but a former Supreme Allied commander during World War II. That experience shaped his leadership style. He valued stability, avoided reckless decisions, and understood the true cost of war. Eisenhower resisted direct military interventions whenever possible, relying instead on diplomacy and strategic balance. One of his most lasting achievements was the creation of the interstate highway system. The project unified the country economically, improved safety and mobility, and strengthened national defense. The infrastructure built under Eisenhower still defines modern America. In his farewell address, he warned the nation about the dangers of the military-industrial complex. It was a rare moment of a leader using power to caution against its own excesses. Harry S. Truman. Harry S. Truman became president at one of the most critical moments in history. He assumed office suddenly after Franklin Roosevelt's death, with World War II still ongoing. He lacked long preparation and the political stature of his predecessor, yet almost immediately faced a decision that would change the world. Truman authorized the use of atomic weapons against Japan, a decision that remains deeply controversial. He understood that every option would result in massive loss of life, but believed a swift end to the war would ultimately save more lives than a prolonged invasion. After the war, Truman focused on shaping a new global order. He supported the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe and became a key architect of NATO. These actions laid the foundation for the Western Alliance for decades. Truman was not a charismatic figure, but his choices defined the post-war balance of power and established the United States as a global leader. John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy became a symbol of a new generation in American politics. The youngest elected president, he took office during the Cold War, when the world stood on the edge of nuclear conflict. His image represented renewal, optimism, and technological ambition. The most dangerous moment of his presidency was the Cuban Missile Crisis. The placement of Soviet missiles in Cuba brought the U.S. and USSR to the brink of nuclear war. Kennedy rejected an immediate military strike and chose pressure combined with negotiation. That restraint helped avert catastrophe. Domestically, Kennedy initiated the push for civil rights, though he did not live to complete those reforms. He also launched the space race goal of landing a man on the moon, a promise fulfilled after his death. Kennedy's assassination turned him into a legend, but even in a short presidency, he shaped the direction of American leadership for generations. Ronald Reagan. In the late 1970s, America was going through a hard time. Prices for groceries and gas were rising fast, and people felt discouraged. When Ronald Reagan became president in 1981, he brought a message of optimism. He believed that if you let people keep more of their money, they would spend it and create jobs. This idea became known as Reaganomics. He cut taxes and reduced government rules, which eventually helped the economy grow again. People started finding work, and the American dream felt possible once more. However, his biggest achievement was on the world stage. For decades, the US and the Soviet Union were in a Cold War, a tense standoff where both sides had nuclear weapons pointed at each other. Reagan took a firm stand against communism, but he was also a great communicator. He did something brave. He started talking to the Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev. In 1987, Reagan stood in front of the Berlin Wall, which divided East and West Germany, and famously said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." His mixture of military strength and personal diplomacy helped lead to peaceful treaties. Because of his efforts, the Cold War ended without a massive world war, and millions of people in Eastern Europe gained their freedom. He is remembered as the man who helped bring peace to a divided world. James Madison. Imagine trying to build a brand new country from scratch. That was the challenge after the American Revolution. The states were arguing, and there was no strong plan for how to run things. James Madison, a quiet and studious man from Virginia, stepped up to solve this. He spent months reading about history and ancient governments to find a better way. At the Constitutional Convention in 1787, Madison arrived with a detailed plan. He is known as the father of the Constitution because his ideas formed the backbone of the U.S. government. He proposed a system of checks and balances so that no single person like a king could have too much power. He wanted the government to be divided into three parts that watched over each other. But Madison didn't stop there. Many people were afraid the new government might take away their personal freedoms. To fix this, Madison wrote the Bill of Rights. These are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution that guarantee things like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the right to a fair trial. Every time an American speaks their mind or practices their faith freely today, they are benefiting from Madison's hard work. He gave the world a blueprint for a government that serves the people, not the other way around. Lyndon B. Johnson. Lyndon B. Johnson, often called LBJ, became president during a very sad time right after President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963. LBJ was a tall, loud man who knew how to get things done in politics. He wanted to finish what Kennedy started, but he also had his own dream. He wanted to build a great society where poverty and racial injustice did not exist. At that time, Black Americans in the South were still treated like second-class citizens. They were often stopped from voting and forced to use separate, lower-quality schools and restaurants. LBJ used all his political power to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This law made it illegal to discriminate against people because of their race. A year later, he signed the Voting Rights Act to make sure every citizen had a voice in elections. LBJ also cared deeply about the poor and the elderly. Before him, many older people went bankrupt trying to pay for doctors. He created Medicare and Medicaid, programs that provide health care to millions of seniors and low-income families. He also started Head Start to help poor children get an education, even though he faced many challenges. LBJ's Great Society programs changed the face of America, making it a much fairer and more compassionate place for everyone. Barack Obama. When Barack Obama took office in 2009, he inherited a massive crisis. The Great Recession had just begun. Banks were failing, people were losing their homes, and millions were losing their jobs. It was the worst economic disaster since the 1930s. Obama's first major task was to save the American economy from collapsing. He signed a massive Recovery Act that put money back into the hands of the people and saved the American car industry, which was about to go bankrupt. Because of these actions, the economy slowly began to grow again, and the unemployment rate started to drop. But Obama wanted to do more than just fix the economy. He wanted to fix a broken healthcare system. For decades, millions of Americans couldn't afford health insurance. If they got sick, They faced massive debts. Obama fought for the Affordable Care Act, often called Obamacare. This law made it so insurance companies couldn't reject people for having a pre-existing condition like cancer or asthma. It allowed millions of young people to stay on their parents' plans and helped over 20 million people get insurance for the first time. By focusing on the average Joe, Obama worked to ensure that a medical emergency wouldn't ruin a family's life, leaving a legacy of health and stability for the 21st century.